I was speaking to people a little bit before in preparation for this, and I asked, I said, what's the interest? Is the interest more in the earlier history of the church, or kind of like where we are right now? And I got just about everybody I talked to said they wanted to hear about the earlier church. And so that's what we're going to talk about. In fact, we're going to go way back to 1517. Anybody know what 1517 is? 95 Theses on the door of the church, Martin Luther. Oh, okay. And of course, he said the Bible was the only authority. He turned his back on the church, and he said salvation by faith, good deeds won't do you any good. You need your faith. Then just about almost a generation later, in 1534, I'm not going to bother you with all these early, it's necessary here to lay this foundation. Henry VIII, King of England, broke with the Church of Rome because he had gotten a papal dispensation to marry his wife, who was his the former wife of his deceased brother. And then he wanted to marry somebody else, but it was a new pope, and he didn't want to counter what the earlier pope had said in giving the dispensation. And so he said, no, you can't have a dispensation, you can't marry Anne Boleyn. So Henry said, essentially, phooey on you, I'm the head of the church. And he gave himself the dispensation and married her. Of course, he went on to have, as you know, 6 or 7 wives. Okay, so that was 1634, that England essentially became what would be, today we think of as Anglican, but no pope. It's the thing, no pope. And that's why in those early days were called papists to distinguish us from other Christians. Then with the discovery of the Americas, in 1620, of course, the Mayflower landed. But then it wasn't until a half century later, 1673, that missionaries, and this is where I wish I had a map, but you can look here on the front and envision this. The Susquehanna River is called the Highway of Missionaries because, and it goes down, it's easier if you go down, start at the bottom and go up. It starts here between Lancaster and York counties and goes up. And then when it gets up to Northumberland and Montour, it goes over, there's a branch that goes up. Okay, it goes the whole way up through what's now New York into Canada. Missionaries came from Quebec way back then and were able to Christianize Indians along. In fact, if you look at settlements, you see that in those early days there were more settlements closer to the Susquehanna because that was, as they say, the highway. So they came down, and then, okay, now we're going to have a little bit of a problem here. In 1632, Charles I of England gave Lord Baltimore what's essentially Maryland. Okay, of course that's on our southern border, right? Okay, Lord Baltimore himself was Catholic, although the colony did not remain Catholic for too much. We'll just put that aside for just a second. 60 years later or so, in 1682, Charles II gave Pennsylvania to William Penn. But the Maryland border came up here into Pennsylvania, and the Pennsylvania border went down there into Maryland. So there was this section, of course we all know about the Mason-Dixon line, they finally settled it, but in that section, and it's southern York and Adams County, but Hanover is the area and around Hanover. Okay, meanwhile, they had put what's called the test oath, and I had a slide for this too, but anyway, the test oath, if you wanted to own land in England, and hence in the colonies, because colonies belong to England, right? If you wanted to own land, if you wanted to vote, if you wanted to sign your name to anything, you had to sign this test oath. This test oath, among other things, said there's no transubstantiation, no, none of that, no saints, no Blessed Mother, no Mass per se. What? Well, but in this disputed land there, where the disputed border between Pennsylvania and Maryland, who's in charge? Pennsylvania? Who's in charge? Maryland? Oh, yeah. And so that was almost they call a safe haven. And in fact, that's where then Conewago, just close to Hanover, was established. And of course, that's our oldest parish. But they were there. Priests came up from the Maryland province and created a settlement there, and had a nice little picture of a wooden church that was built originally. So they came. Meanwhile, down in Maryland, Bohemia Manor had been settled by Jesuits, and it was from there that the Jesuits came up to Conewago. Then in 1720, time is marching on here, now we're into the 18th century. In 1720, St. Joseph's was established in Philadelphia, and that was the first Catholic settlement, an official Catholic settlement, I guess you would say, of them. And the priests from there then traveled west over to the Lancaster area and down to Conewago too, but meanwhile the Jesuits had come up from Conewago. But Conewago was first, and then Lancaster was second, because the priests came over there. It was Father Grayton especially who came. I'm not going to go over the names, actually. They're in this little bit. Don't follow it, but we're going to look at that a little later. Okay. Conewago was the only official Catholic settlement between Conewago and St. Louis. St. Louis, okay, I mean, we're talking early time. So we have these little clusters of people that would come, and as we'll note a little bit when we go through this, they tend to settle by where they came from. They came from Germany, they came from England, they came from Croatia. There were these settlements. And they didn't have, of course, missions as such. They had mission stations, but not missions. Stations would be just for a place, somebody's house, where the priest could come and say Mass. There was a priest starting out in 1752. His name actually was Andreas Steinmeier. Okay, any French people, or I mean German people in here? Steinmeier. Steinmeier, do you know what Meyer stands for in German? Farmer. Okay, well, so here came Father Steinmeier, and he wanted to blend in with all these English settlements. So guess what name he took? Farmer, Father Farmer. And he's known, Father Farmer is known as the missionary on horseback, or the priest on horseback, because he really, I don't know what happened. After he was ordained, he wanted to go to China, but instead the Jesuits sent him here to the United States, and that's good, and that's good for us, because he traveled all through, well, I shouldn't say all through Pennsylvania over to the river, then later he was up in New York too, at the risk of his own life, because the oath was still in place, and so that's why he traveled as a metal repairman. Like if you had a pan that had a leak in it, he would repair it, and so that's how he was able to get through the countryside. Okay, so he started out in 1752. Finally, in 1768, and hey, we're still 100 years before the diocese, right? 1768, because you know what happened in 1868? What happened in 1868? Diocese of Harrisburg, yeah. So 1768, finally, the test oath was revoked. Okay, well that helped a little bit. Of course, We're talking 1775, 1776 is the American Revolution. Okay, so now we're the American Revolution, now we're our own selves, we're not under England anymore. And so in 1790, now that's still after the Revolution, but in 1790 finally the Diocese of Baltimore was established or founded. And it took in all of the original states of the whole United States. Bishop John Carroll was named the first bishop, and as I say, of all the churches in the newly established United States. Okay, we're at 1790. Now finally we're going to move to the 1800s, to the 19th century. In 1808, the Diocese of Philadelphia was established. Philadelphia, New York, and Boston, okay? So we're established, and then it became an archdiocese, and it had little dioceses, namely Harrisburg later, but it was, so we have the, originally, oh, I didn't mention, originally, before we were Diocese of Harrisburg, where were we back in all those states? What diocese were we in all those times I was talking about?
Philadelphia.
Before Philadelphia. Before Maryland.
London.
No. London. Yeah, we were part of the Diocese of London. So it goes London, Baltimore, 1808, Philadelphia. Okay, we're still 60 years away from Harrisburg, but we have Philadelphia. And two significant standouts for that. Let me check my time here. I get talking and carried away. Okay. If I talk too fast, please tell me to. One of the most significant bishops of the Diocese of Philadelphia was St. John Newman, okay? And we probably all know he came on horseback too, and he ministered. He made various trips this way. Meanwhile, they were working on a road between Philadelphia and Harrisburg. Okay, so in 1852, especially, he came. Also, during the period of the Diocese of Philadelphia, we had many people come from Ireland because that was the time of the potato famine in Ireland. And so many people came here just seeking a place to be able to eat. Moving forward now, we're still in the Diocese of Philadelphia. 1863, anybody know that in history? 1863. Civil War, and 1860, Battle of Gettysburg. The Catholic Church, the original church, you have a new church now. People here from Gettysburg? I know there were people here earlier. People. The original church was used as a hospital, and during the Civil War. And when you go in there, as I know, I've been to Mass there, you just have this feeling that all these dying soldiers were there being ministered to in 1863. Okay, 1863. Finally, 1868, what do we have? The Diocese of Harrisburg, yeah. With the Diocese of Harrisburg, we had, would you believe this, in those colonial times, when you think of that test oath, keeping Catholics out or very much under the radar or whatever, 25,000 Catholics. Now, there were originally 18 counties in the diocese. Now we have 15, but there were 18 along the side here, but a little bit later what happened to 3 of them. But for 25,000 Catholics, 19 parishes, 34 missions, and missions being places that didn't have a resident. To be a parish, and you're supposed to have a priest in residence. And then a mission, an official mission, is attached to a parish. And then you have mission stations where it's just a stopping off place where a priest knows that he can say Mass usually in somebody's house, or if there's a large enough group, maybe even in the barn. Okay, so we come now to our bishops. And of course, we're out of the Diocese of Philadelphia, and so the first bishops were actually from Philadelphia. The first one was Jeremiah Shanahan. He was only in his 30s when he became bishop, but he came and did a very nice job with the Catholics that were here. And as I say, we want to go to this, but let me go through this part first, and then we'll turn to this so you're not going back and forth, okay? Am I going too fast here? You say, am I just kind of hitting you with too many numbers?
Give a microphone. Your mic's not on. Yeah, it's not working too good. Not here.
There's no microphone. There's nothing to pick it up. Oh, okay. Okay, now, earlier, after Philadelphia was established, a seminary opened, Borromeo, opened in Philadelphia, but before that, all our priests were from abroad. Okay, I mean, we didn't have any seminaries here for priests. And of course, we were very fortunate. We had lots and lots of Jesuits, but then with the French, all the goings on in French, we got a lot of priests from France came during the 18th century especially. But we have Jeremiah Shanahan, and then we're 18 what? Can you name the counties of the, can you name the counties of the diocese, which was founded in 1868, yes. Okay, the next year, 1869, we did have an ordination in the diocese. Okay, and various places were set up. For example, well, as we'll see, we go through here, Sylvan Heights was established as an orphanage soon after that and the like. Let me just go through the bishops quickly, and then we're going to turn to this, okay? Thomas McGovern came on in 20 years later in 1888. He's the only bishop that wasn't born on this continent. He was born in England. Not that, but it just is a matter of whatever. The third bishop was the brother of Jeremiah, John Shanahan. Okay, he came on board in 1899, and then 2 years later, in 1901, was when the Diocese of Altoona, Johnstown was formed, and we lost Center, Clinton, and Fulton, I believe, counties. Okay, he went on, of course, he was bishop into World War I, and then Philip McDevitt came. And Philip McDevitt, of course, is very much the education priest, we'll say all those early ones too. Of course, followed by then Bishop Leach, who was the fifth bishop. He came on board, and for a long time, he was 35 years a bishop. It's a long time, and he did a lot too. He came on board in 1935. Depression was coming out and the like. Jumping ahead a little bit, in 1962 was the Vatican Council. Now, let's see, when I look around here, I know a lot of people in this room can remember the pre-Vatican II Mass, right? Everything was English. You zipped your lip when you came into church, and you didn't unzip it until you went out of church. Yeah, yeah. Everything was in Latin. Yes, yes. Okay. Vatican II really changed things because it brought the language of the land, English in our case, and also we started to open our mouths because we had the Mass where wasn't just the altar servers who said the responses, we all said the responses, right? And we also sang. Yeah. Okay. If I can just give a little personal thing here, I was in college at the time, And it was Elizabethtown College as brother's school, and one of the requirements there was that you had to go to chapel every week. I mean, you agreed to that, and it was okay. I mean, they didn't preach their religion against anybody else's, but we did sing. And so, yes.
Could you
Stand here so you can hear better? Okay.
Yeah, you might stand that far up.
Okay. All right. So if you can't hear, yeah. Oh, yeah. Sorry. Yeah. So we got hymnals, and I said, oh, and I know that one. I would call it a chapel hymn. Oh, that's another chapel hymn. And so I already knew, because it's amazing. So where did we get all those hymns that are in our hymnal? Most of them are from the Protestant tradition. And I say that just as a footnote. Just as a footnote. Yeah. Okay, well, back to that. We have John Shanahan, Philip McDevitt, and then George Leach with Vatican II. And Bishop Leach did attend Vatican II. He was one of the attendees, so he was right there in Rome with everybody else. But as I say, English, active participation, hymns, singing, and the like. 4 years later, in 1966, the Catholic Witness was established. And so now we're getting official communication in the diocese. 1968, of course, is the 100th anniversary, and there were several things going on. One was confirmation at Hershey Stadium, and there's a wonderful picture available, and you just have imagined it's up there, of this confirmation mass. The stadium was filled. This Hershey Stadium was filled with Catholics, if you can imagine that, in 1968. Also in 1968, the diocese put out a history of the diocese. And does anybody have a copy of that? A couple hands. A most valuable book, because it concentrated on the parishes. The book is about this thick. And the part about the diocese level is about this thick, and everything else is the parishes. Opposite of, if I just mention a little bit, Highway of Missionaries, a book that came out here in the 21st century, illustrated history of the Diocese of Harrisburg, where the focus was on more the diocese level, the diocesan level. In fact, the parishes have just half a page, and so it's just, the focus is completely switched. Okay, so Bishop Leach saw to all of that. Okay, and then following him, we had, of course, Bishop Daly, and with him, significant in 1975, the original portion of the Diocesan Center opened. Now that was important because it brought together all the various offices, education, Catholic Charities, everything came there in one site, because they had been spread all over, mostly all over the Harrisburg area, but it was nice that they were able to come together. And then, of course, Bishop Keeler was next, and then Bishop DiTillo. He was 14 years. He's next to the longest, of course, Bishop Leach being the longest in tenure. And of course, what people probably will remember him for is the 1995 merging of the parishes into 12 new parishes, and we'll talk about that in just a minute when we get to this. But also, he saw to the enlargement of the Diocesan Center to its present size today, and also the establishment of the Juan Baptista parish, a Spanish parish in the Lancaster area. Okay, of course, Father, or now Bishop Rhodes came next, and of course then Bishop McFadden followed, and under him, the Korean church, St. Peter's Son Korean Catholic Church, was established in the Harrisburg area. And so we have those two ethnic churches that were established, but those 35 others were condensed. Okay, and then that brings us to Bishop Gaynor and this wonderful celebration for the 175th year. Okay, so that brings us up to here. See, let me check my time again here. Okay, I have 38 minutes, or no, 18 minutes. Okay, 18 minutes. See, I was in the classroom for 42 years. Okay, you don't keep classes overtime, so I'm not going to keep you overtime. Okay, yeah. Okay, on the front here is a map of the diocese. You can find your parish in there. And then I put some statistics down below there. And there I put London, Baltimore, Philadelphia, and then our big date, March 3rd. And as was mentioned, there's going to be a big celebration again to close the year on March 3rd. The seat of the bishop is the St. Patrick's Cathedral. That had been St. Patrick's Church originally. Many people from Ireland came and clustered, of course, along the river, and they were building the canal there along the river, and so it really brought a large cluster of Irish, and hence we have St. Patrick's being Irish and the like. St. Patrick, of course, is our patron saint. We're part of the Archdiocese of Philadelphia. As I say, an archdiocese is simply a diocese that has little dioceses, ours being there's a number of square miles of population, number of parishes today. Okay, I'm going, you saw me sort of smile here, because I spoke to a group of Boy Scouts a couple weeks ago, and we had this song that I wrote for the diocese. I realized people not only didn't they know that there were 15 dioceses or counties in the diocese, didn't know what they were. And so we created this song to the tune of A, B, C, D, E, F, G. Okay, well, I didn't want to sing A, B, C, D, E, F, G to a group of 15-year-old Boy Scouts. And so my nephew, who's a teacher, made a rap of it. Can you name the counties of the diocese? You know, like that it goes. I was going to play that and have you sing along, but now you've been spared. Okay, but anyway, there they are. They're in alphabetical order. I was driving when I was in my 10 years. I was at the diocese to say I would realize that people didn't know, and I didn't know when I came that there were 15 counties in the diocese. I thought there's got to be a way, because we have school groups. We'd had school groups come to visit in the diocese, and so it was on a trip on Route 283. I thought, whoa, that'll work. And Adams, Columbia, Cumberland, Dauphin. Okay, I'm singing one. But hey, my 2-year-old great nephew is learning it. He says, yeah, he says he's got it about 80% down. Okay, now in the middle here, I pulled out the timelines from the Highway of Missionaries book, and I marked mine, but I want you to see it just for the color, and I underscored in red the establishment of the parishes. Now, they weren't established as parishes. They were maybe missionary stations or missions, and then became parishes. But I underscored them, and you can see them here in how many there are and how they come here on these first pages. Okay, all right. And now the green are schools, because nuns and missionaries and the like came and established schools, and so we have education coming here. 2 already here on the first 2 pages. Excuse me, if you turn, look at this. And here we are. We're still not up to the diocese. The first 3 pages are pre-diocese. And so you can see here how many parishes we had, and then how many, look here. This is starting at 1846. So the part there right before the establishment of the Diocese of Harrisburg. And you see again in the pink, the schools. So there's a lot of activity going on. 1868 Of course, as a year we become a diocese, and Bishop Shanahan's our first bishop. And here again, just look at all these parishes that were established. Okay? And in the pink, look at the schools. And so you see the place is just really, really growing. You turn the page, look here, 1887 through 1915, look at all those parishes. See, all those parishes and schools. You see all the schools. Now, we turn the next page. We have a new color introduced. We have the underscored red for the parishes. We have the green for the schools. But now, look what's starting to happen here. And it started over here in 1929. And it started, well, two different ways. One way, when you think of as I mentioned about the Catholics being kind of in clusters, but now we're becoming more merged. And so, for example, here, St. Mary's High School in Lebanon was renamed Lebanon Catholic High School. In other words, it wasn't associated just with the one church, but with the area. And you'll see that happening more and more. You see, and what's happening in the blue is the beginning of mergers. And mergers began with the schools. Okay, and as I say, I went through here and I said, well, why didn't you mark mine? Yeah, well, yeah, right, and we didn't have a color copier for it, but you can see here, 1, 2, 3 mergers on these two pages. When you turn the page, you can see lots more mergers. Okay, now we have mergers not only of the schools, but now, of course, it's going to come with parishes starting also. And up here, we're up to 1983, which would be up to William Keeler as bishop. It comes in, and of course, you look here on these pages, and you see lots and lots of mergers. Okay. Now, the other part I want to mention, I kind of alluded to it. You say, well, what's that pink? What's that pink on your book? And the pink are the ethnic parishes. And here we have just the Irish is first. As I mentioned, many Irish came, but you see all the ethnic parishes there from 1846 through 1886. They're the pink guys. And look here, from 1887 through, well, actually almost through World War I. Lots of ethnic parishes. But then, of course, they start to go the other way with the mergers. And of course, we had the big merger here in the early 90s. Okay. So many people have been part of our history. It's just amazing. You look back, you look over the names, and on the one hand, I feel guilty here that I haven't mentioned names of missionaries other than Father Farmer, Father Steinmeier, who renamed himself Father Farmer, and Bishop Newman. But there were so many others that built our diocese and made it what it is today. 10 minutes? 10 minutes to go. Questions? Any questions? I talked to you all gnome? Yeah. Okay. Hey, a question over here? Yes.
Linda, in the Diocese of Harrisburg, how many people are in it about?
Now, let's see, 223,000, which is about 10% of the population. So 1 of every 10 persons is a Catholic.
diocese or?
In the
just
whole
the-
diocese,
County,
yeah.
okay.
Could I ask you to sing this before you go? It's, it's to the tune of A, B, C, D, E, F, G. Are you ready? Here we go. Good loud voices. Can you name the counties of the diocese which was founded in 1868? Everybody? Adams, Columbia, Cumberland, Dauphin, Franklin, Juniata, Lancaster, Lebanon, Mifflin, Montour, Northumberland, Perry, Snyder, Union, and York. Now you know the counties of the diocese which was founded in 1868. All right. Okay, thank you. Thank you. You've been a good audience.